packaging and covers.
Fantastic. Welcome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park here in San Francisco. We're on Lema Teshaloni land. Thank you for joining us in person and online. Hello, online audience. We appreciate you. Tonight, we are here celebrating Anne K. Yoder's book, The Enchancers. Woo! Thank you so kindly. We are also joined by Rita Bullwinkel. Let's get a hand for Rita. So I have very brief business before we get to the fun part of the evening here. First, I would encourage you to check out our full event calendar on our website at greenapplebooks.com. We have a pretty great season.
It's amazing.
Thanks. We have a pretty great season ahead of us. I'm a little biased, but thank you for the plug. And I will tell you about one event, and then you can check out the rest on your own. Our next event after this one, we're hosting Rebecca Mackay alongside Rachel Kong, celebrating Mackay's latest novel, I Have Some Questions for You. That is this coming Thursday, March 2nd. It is a ticketed event, but a ticket is the cost of the book, so you get a book, and that's what it is. It's pretty intimate. It's going to be exactly where we are now, and pretty cool, pretty good company. So check that out on our website, and if you need assistance in finding a ticket, let me know, and I'm glad to help you. Masks are not required in our event space, but they are always encouraged. Now is a good time to turn off your cell phones if you haven't already, or at least put them on silent, so you're not like that guy, right? Thank you also for buying books from this evening's authors. We always appreciate it when you are able. And if you've been here before, you've heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. We have other books too. Take a look. You might like them. I don't know. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two authors that are joining us this evening. First, on my direct right here, Rita Bullwinkel is the author of Headshot, forthcoming author of Headshot, and Belly Up, which garnered both a 2022 Whiting Award and a 2018 Believer Book Award. She is an editor-at-large for McSweeney's, a contributing editor and for Noon, and the creator of Oral Forest. She lives here in San Francisco and teaches at CCA and USF. Is that correct? And USF. Please give a hand for Rita Bullwinkel. And last but most certainly not least, Anne K. Yoder's fiction, essays, and criticism have appeared in Fence, Bomb, Tin House, New York Tyrant, and Make, among other publications. She writes, lives, and occasionally dispenses pharmaceuticals in Chicago, where it's much colder, I'm told. And her book, The Enchancers, is the reason we're here tonight. So please give another hand for Anne K. Yoder.
Thank you. It is much colder in Chicago. I am actually delighted to be here. So I guess we're starting with, I'll give a little reading from The Enchancers to give you a sense of the book. It's always a challenge to know where to read from, but I am going to go definitively mid-book, mid-crisis, with one of the multiple narrators, but the main narrator, actually, Hannah Marcus, and I'll just leave you with that and read. A dark plume engulfed the factory. It's just what I had imagined my brain would look like if it were dashed open, if my mind continued in this direction. I'd become what? A pumpkin and a dimwit? An apple, solid, sweet, and wholesome? Or worse, a fruit rotting. I couldn't imagine performing the same laborious tasks day after day, organizing information, pouring pills into containers, and placing containers into machines, or a future in administering customer satisfaction surveys been asking, do you have a moment to tell me about your experience at the dispensary today? What kind of future would that be anyway? Though I wondered what kind of future any of us had here in Lumina, here on this hill, a speck on this planet, mid-six and careening toward finish, here at the beginning of my own life, was the beginning of the end of life as any of us had known it. The sky was gray and all seemed bleak. I made my way past the charging stations and dispensary windows, their neon orange capsules always lit, Outside, so many suits spread across the plaza, all were tapping at their keys, whispering into what receiver the ether. All just talking, their words light as a whisper in the wind, whispering as if trying to allure me. I heard wisps of hello, love, howdy, hey loser, order now, burning down, devastating, staggering, connected, dropping. Breaking up, bit rate, ISP, rate your trip, greater frequency, greater speed. I swear I could hear synapses humming with intake, processing messages, melodies, IMs, DMs, swipes, all firing so rapidly, all of this unfolding happening in the air, in the pinpoint, in the spaces between, or perhaps even within us. We're always moving as fast as the world is rotating. But what was left to hold on to? Not much, Dr. Billy had said about what I could do beyond more capsules, pills, and tablets. I was well on my way to downgrading. Not much could be done besides taking and waiting. Billy's first direction was to keep my mind at rest. A body at rest is less likely to fall, to take Aspire, and if that didn't work, sedate. At least that was one of the treatments detailed in the packet Olya had sent me. It required being placed in a semi-hypnotic state for a stretch of days, weeks even, to alleviate the mental weight. I would prefer not to, I'd said to Billy, to not to do any of this, and he'd smiled his menacing smile. Of course he did. That's when I'd started to run. The clouds over the hill were darker than I'd ever seen as I ran to the bank of the river. And as I ran, I could hear Judy's voice in my head. My device shook as if on cue. I took it from my bag. I could see Judy mouthing words. I could make out factory. I could make out falling. I shoved the device back into my bag. But somehow this unmuted her, and I could hear her voice muffled. I implore you, come home, honey, please. You must take all of your meds. Do you hear me? All of them. Once you're rotting, there's no stopping. These last words echoed in my head. I saw myself a putrid fruit, bottom rotting and flies abuzz in the noonday sun. As I approached the river's edge, I saw its banks dotted with tufts of white. More tufts were floating downstream, almost like dumplings. I ran onto the bridge and stopped mid-span by a brown case atop the guardrail with the words, "Break in emergency," written across glass. Behind the small pane, a life preserver glowed orange like the pill in the dispensary window. Whoever had placed a life preserver at this precise location knew the effect of great heights on the desire to leap. Dread overcame me. What? Was this not an emergency? Suddenly, it seemed like I'd been led here to this exact location. I broke the glass, and I took the preserver. It hadn't occurred to me that I would do this just now, but this was just one surface of so many things that needed breaking. I wished someone would have placed a vial of Delixir behind the glass so I could down a handful and then leap and soar and take in the skyline in a brief, wondrous flash before falling so fast. I rummaged through my pockets. All I had was anxieties. I swallowed one, then a few, and climbed up onto the rail. I looked out at the billows of smoke before me. I waited a minute, closed my eyes, and dropped the preserver into the river. I stood on the top rail and dangled a foot over. I stood there, eyes closed, trying to will myself over. I couldn't. My arms shook as I clung to the case, as I somehow guided my feet back to the concrete. I could see bodies swarming on the hill and white tins forming a line at the top. I wanted to run to witness the chaos, but my chest felt so heavy. I sat on the concrete, and then I took my device out and watched Judy's face over and over, her jaw opening and closing and opening again. Suddenly her teeth grew dark, and two chimps emerged from behind my mother's molar. They wrestled onto her tongue. With her next scream, they covered their ears. I closed my eyes. Was this really happening? I spied another chimp in the shadow of her cheek. This one had a large stick and started banging on a filling. It made a tinny sound that became maddening. It made my head throb. This couldn't be happening. And yet, I watched this all play on while Judy's mouth yammered and filled with capsules of cream and navy, peach and purple, sea green and blue. These capsules filled her whole of a mouth until they started spilling out and breaking, releasing fluid. liquid magentas and purple streams, dark ash falling. Judy had a halo of smoke and glow. She looked like the patron saint of something sordid. The air smelled of burnt vinegar. I heard Celia's voice in my mind repeating, "What good are wings if you don't fly?" I saw her in a green gown climbing through the hospital window, tiptoeing on its ledge. I saw Teague's face before she turned her gaze toward the hill. I saw her platinum wig, her pearly teeth, a pomegranate seed rolling. Teague whispered as I held her hand. She said she saw a light beyond the factory. And then the warmth of a body beside me, a pair of legs, an arm on my back, curls against my cheek. A sharp, familiar scent, maybe patchouli? I turned my head and saw Azzy's eyes focused, her mouth covered. Her concern. She said she'd come to look for me when I wouldn't answer her messages. She said she'd been sitting beside me on the side of the road for more than 15 minutes. That I wasn't moving and staring straight ahead, that she'd put the mask over my mouth and I hadn't responded. I told her she was crazy and she said she wished that explained it. I felt her hand on my back. I was surprised how this calmed me. Toxic crosswinds, she said. Factory is burned. Burned? Incinerated, collapsed inward. Wait, what? I gasped. How could it? Chemical substances released, indoors mandatory. They say we have nothing to worry about. We'll blow over. But will it? We need to get going. Many are sick, shallow breath, beefs and sweat. You should get checked. I'll be okay. Just come with me. We'll go see Trini. She'll make it quick.
And it is such a joy to hear you read and to be here with you. We were talking a little bit about before that the last time I heard you read was in 2018 in Chicago, when you read an excerpt of what would become this book. And it is so exciting to hear you read from it in beautiful book form. The excerpt you read touched on a part of the book that we were talking about before, weirdly mimics recent real life events. Kind of in the middle of the book, the factory lights on, I won't say exactly how, but it explodes. There is some type of airborne toxic event. Obviously, in Ohio, we have been seeing these crazy news events, and I was curious on what your experience of that has been, seeing something that you've written into a book, that it takes so long to make a book.
It takes so long.
It takes so long. Then seeing it kind of like bizarrely mimicked in current events.
Yeah. I mean, it's uncanny. And I guess it isn't like specifically uncanny like in relationship to this book. I do think with the factory fire, like I had been thinking about DeLillo and the airborne toxic event, but that was just, I think, thinking about books I'd read and thinking about that. But I mean, I think there is a certain, I find with literature, a certain prescience or awareness, and maybe it's just like tuning into like what's happening in the world. Like I am surprised, but I feel like in a way, like as a writer, to and within this book to notice these interconnections, but they're very specific to me and my thinking and like kind of where I've been, and then I also wonder if that's just like a recognition of something that's more widespread. I mean, and also the train in Ohio is so like it's so bizarre in and of itself, tied in with DeLillo, and that my understanding is that the film White Noise with Adam Driver was filmed there before this happened, and then the airborne toxic event of sorts has actually happened there. So that in of itself is kind of unbelievable. And then just thinking about this book being out now, and maybe it's the timing. It's just like I would never have thought that this book would. I don't know. In writing a book, it's just kind of this sense of trying to like tap into what's in the world, but like never actually realizing that what might, like when it's out in the world, might play out in parallel.
Well, clearly, I think with this book, you are tapping into all of our either explicit or tangential relationships with pharmaceuticals. It's so much a part of many of our daily lives, if not at least occasional lives. And yeah, I'm curious to know more about when you started working on this book, what the evolution of it has been, and also the fact that you are a pharmacist and have been working as a pharmacist, and how that has influenced you writing this world where biotech and pharmaceuticals are such a central part of how people are interacting with the reality.
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like that's almost like the pharmaceuticals, biotech interacting with our reality is just a reflection of our everyday reality, and like that
Right.
becomes more I become more aware of that just the more I read and the more that I'm aware. But I do think it is like, so the book, I didn't want to write about pharmacy at all. Like it was just like, that's my job. I come home, I want to write about other things that, and writing is like a reprieve from that space. But then somehow, I mean, I think I then went to an art school for an MFA, and I wasn't working in pharmacy, and it was just like, wow, I have this whole archive of awareness and experience that I can deal with creatively, and that seemed like such a gift. In that moment when it hadn't existed in that way previously. So I think really the genesis of this book started then when I was in grad school and not working as a pharmacist at all, and thought that I would never go back to working as a pharmacist, and just thinking about the ways that I could use my experience and play with that. I mean, like the pharmaceutical language, I think, and just the ideas of maybe to work through the ideas that I had about the pharmaceutical industry in like a fictional sense, which I don't know, felt more interesting than just writing, an essay about, let's talk about the pharmaceutical industry, because,
I've always experienced your work as being tremendously language driven, and I feel like you in this book have harnessed like the language of pharmaceuticals with such scathing perception. That's really exciting for me as a reader to read. Okay, something else I wanted to ask you about, and this is kind of going back a little bit to the very bizarre, eerie, prescient, horrifying events in Ohio, which is that this book takes place in a factory town in Lumena Hills that manufactures these mind-altering pharmaceuticals. And I found myself so interested to be in this space of the factory town and this kind of like archetypal setting where industry is inextricably linked to everyone's lives, and something that like exists in places in reality like Ohio. And so I was curious to know more about how you came to the setting of the factory town, how Lumena Hills kind of arrived to you, and your relationship to the factory town setting.
like that's a harder question for me to answer, even though like I feel like it's a really like I'm interested in answering that question, but because Lumina Hills as an idea like was very the town in this novel was very forward to me in writing it, and I think that was part of the reason why it took me a while to actually write the novel, because I had a sense of the town and I wanted to convey that through the characters and through multiple voices, and I didn't want to set it anywhere specifically like in the US, even though I felt like it was, I mean, just from my experience and just from my imagination, it was in the US, but like in the future. But I think it was also this idea of a microcosm of just looking at like the dominance of like the pharmaceutical corporation. I mean, and that's I don't know if that's like an easy way of saying it, but I think that like looking at Lumina Hills and this factory and the ways that it's running, and that everyone's life is kind of caught up within it, both for their own subsistence, but also for their own mental health. And then, then I think coming into the space of whether or not this space is one where you can question that, which it isn't, it's kind of a fragile belief system, or I say fragile in the sense that like the people in charge are very like invested in this being the dominant belief system and the dominant way of things, and so but I think Lumina Hills, like, I feel like it is in some way like very, very much a space of playing out kind of what's happening with the pharmaceutical industry, like in a very small space. I mean, because our lives are all engaged with that, and there is this whole narrative of like that we're all caught up within in some way of, and like, and it's not all bad. I mean, it's not to say that like, oh, this is bad, but like just that this is like just such a profit-making industry, and like what does that mean, and what does it mean when this is the main driving force of wellness. So I think all of these ideas were driving that.
So bizarre that medicine is like this commodity that you pay money for. Very weird. Very weird.
It's so weird, but it's so, yeah, and it's just like, I don't know, in Chicago, it's just like all of these new storefronts are like, hey, here's like
the marketing, the branding.
A care center, right? Like, just hey, like now you have one closer to you. It's like, hey, like your local like clothing shop closed or your local bar, but hey, like now you can like just go get like a B12 shot really fast. It's like,
yeah. I even find, even on like the health insurance level or drop-in emergency rooms, like. Yeah. I'm sure that there are good things about them, but like I think locally there is a pretty new like One Medical in this area, and I'm always getting like digital ads for them in this really weird like lifestyle marketing way. Like surely you too experience illness and want to get better in style, which is very weird. Obviously, like the whole genre of medical commercials, medicine commercials, pharmaceutical commercials.
Right.
It's so in this book. It's like I was thinking about it so much.
And we can't. Well, it's like we can't extract ourselves from that, but we can question it and think about it, right. Or just be aware of it. Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, I just remember the first time like a friend and like her friends who were nurses were talking about like the IVs you get, like with B12 and vitamins when you're hungover, and I'm just like, I was like,
yeah,
Lord, like, oh wow, like, yeah, okay, like you'll, like take a vitamin, like, but yeah, but it is about care, and it is about, but like, I don't know, don't get me started on like, but there's a way to create value and like, and wellness, and like,
Right.
that's so, I mean, and I think the issue is that like it's so divorced from this idea of like health and like what that really is. It's because it's really like attached to this idea of like this company's profit and like what can we make valuable, and like it is like a way to take care of yourself, but it's like, well, but there's so many other ways of doing that.
This is perfectly leading into my next question, which is, okay, in my memory, this is in like, if this book is in 5 acts, the 4th act would be the spa. I'm not sure page count wise, if that's accurate. But there is an incredible spa interlude where our protagonist, Hannah, gets lured to the spa by her manipulative mother. And who's like in bed with the pharmaceutical head in industry, in many ways. And okay, so yeah, I love spas. Like if I could live in a spa, I probably would. And yet, I fully recognize that they are creepy, weird places. Like most often, they are like peddling ideas of wellness, or oftentimes can be really bizarrely like a bizarre mishmash of like non-Western cultures where you're like, here's a space outside the one you know. I mean, there's all sorts of weird problematic things about spas and spa culture, and yet I offer to you that I am successfully marketed and happen to enjoy a sauna every once in a while. But this, it's such, you write the space of the spa, and all of its claustrophobia, but also seduction and enticements so masterfully. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about the spa interlude, Hannah's time there, how you came to write the spa scenes.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. I mean, like this, like the spa scenes were there from the beginning, and it's been a long journey with this novel. So, like, how I think the idea of kind of like this extracted space that was safe in Lamina Hills was enticing for me, and like it seemed like exactly the thing that Hannah's mother, Judy, would like, and that Hannah would be resistant to because it was Judy's thing. But then Hannah gets there and, like, in spite of herself in some ways enjoys it, or even if she doesn't enjoy all of it, but like it is the one space where in this book she's alone and kind of finds her own footing. Like she's not she's exploring, like this book is very much about being in Hannah's head and being with her, and there is pleasure within the spa. I mean, like, and it's one of those things that, like, as a person who wrote this book, I don't think I realized this until afterwards, like it's kind of like, oh, right, yes, it does play this role, and it does play this role of self-exploration, and there's like a cattiness and like a pleasure and also like a disdain that was really fun to write.
It was fun to read. She's there for 2 nights, 3 days.
Yes.
Yeah, long spa trip.
2 nights, 3 days. Yeah, it's like immersive. Yeah, and I mean, like, it is like a great space where Judy can like do all of these things. Like, there's like, what is it, sweat and swirl, exercise in a pill.
Yeah.
It was, and then like Hannah, like
there's the waffle towels.
There's the waffle towels. Yeah. There's like autoerotic, like rocks, the other rocks, which is like orgasm and yeah. I mean, it's like it's amazing. It's like all of our fantasies combined.
I was totally like, this sounds like a malicious space, but one I'm interested in.
Like, nothing is just one thing.
Yeah. Okay, another thing that this book circles so beautifully and realistically and true to life is, we're in this world that quickly announces itself as being other than our like lived real reality, but we are with these three young women who love each other and go to bat for each other in like really intense and physical ways, and so much of it seemed to me about friendship and about witnessing each other. And I was curious how the three of them, Celia, and I'm noticing as you read, Azzy. So
or Azulia.
Azulia,
is her like more proper name that like the adults will call her.
And Hannah, of course. Yeah, the three of them together. How did you meet them? What do they mean to each other? What do you think this book is, I guess, circling around friendship?
I feel like, a female, like teenage female friendship was central to my conception of this book, and just depicting that, I wanted to capture that in a way that felt both, to me, like true to it, but also like with attention and respect, because I find it's personally challenging to find that in literature, but also just feeling that experience of female friendship and of that. I mean, I feel like it's been captured so well in some short stories, like Joy Williams. There are others. But yeah, Joy Williams and like the friends who were like looking at the chemistry teachers that they're just like voyeurs. Like they're Amy Bender too really captures that, and like there is something like so bonding and so intense about like friendship at that point in time, and like as a teenager, and I feel like it's so important. That I wanted to give it a space for importance for Hannah and her friends. And like that was a deliberate move for me of wanting to give them space and to see how they engage within Lumina Hills. And they each have different, they each take different paths, it's very much like an intensity of friendship that happens at a certain point in time, but I think even within the book it plays out to reflect that it isn't that it's very specific to that space and time, but they are very important to each other in that support.
Okay, I have one more question for you. And this is your one question warning. If you have a question for Anne, very soon you will get to ask her. Okay, my last question for you is that while reading the Enchancers, I absolutely did think of Joy Williams, did think, now that you've said it, of Amy Bender's, especially Girl with Flammable Skirt. I also thought a lot of Ted Chiang, because I feel like he does such incredible world building and emotion. I do feel like both of I feel like people talk about him a lot as doing incredible world building, but often leave out that I think he, like you, really has an incredibly rich and true to life and vivid emotional interiority for his characters. And then I did think some about, not tonally, but subject-wise, George Saunders, I think, is, like you, quite interested in how capitalist society and commodification affects our interactions with each other. So I'm curious to know if either of those authors their work resonates with you, or you've never read either of them. Was there anything you were reading while working on this book? Yeah.
I mean, I'm fascinated to hear about just how you categorize this book or how other readers do, because I have certain influences who I'm thinking of, like who while I'm writing, or just thinking about, like I was thinking about Tikkun like theories of a young girl, or that's just one thing. There's a lot more. I'm not thinking of them right now, but like George Saunders and Ted Chiang are not people who I would have thought of. Although, yes, that makes sense. And Ted Chiang, I haven't read much Ted Chiang, but I know of his work, and I know just within the sci-fi realm, and I am ridiculously underread in terms of sci-fi. It's just, even though people classify this as sci-fi, it's just okay, I've read Neuromancer, I've read a few things, and it's I have a background, it's I have a pharmaceutical background, so that's my science credentials, and the rest is fiction. George Saunders has such a heart, and his early work, especially his stories, or his John, especially someone I worked with had guided me to that story, and I think it's also kind of Ishiguro's book. I'm blanking on the title right now, but just this sense of growing up in a lab.
Never Let Me Go.
Never Let Me Go.
Fully, I would fully put Never Let Me Go in this. Yeah. In company with the Enchancers.
So I feel honored, but I also feel the book is, there are so many ideas that I have about the book, but it's so telling and so interesting to me to hear about people's responses, or your reading of it, because I don't know, that's beyond the space of my desire of what the book is, or I as an author, it's I let it go, it's I have the experience of the desire of what I want it to be, and writing it, and then as readers, you have the experience of what does this seem like, and it's exciting to hear that. But
I'm so glad you brought up Ishiguro. I do think that you and Ishiguro both, in several of his novels, there is this interest in what is where humanity starts and ends, and with the drugs being manufactured in Lamena Hills, in the Enhancers, there is this element of how much of each of these characters is the drug or is the environment they're put in, and how much is really them. Where does a human soul start and end? Which is a question that I think Ishiguro is also you totally circling. What are your guys' questions for Anne? Kaylin.
I'm sort of wondering how big the world got for you as you were creating it. Not just with this story itself, but how far did you think in terms of the country that they were in, or the state, or the world, even if it's not necessarily the United States, did you create past this, other factory towns or towns that weren't factory towns, things like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I had a rough idea of that space. I think originally writing the book, I wanted it to be very specific so that it seemed familiar, but not tied to any one specific location, if that makes sense. So I didn't want it to be identifiable to hey, this is the Bay Area, or this, because I don't know, I really enjoy reading work like that, and I think that there's something that's so universal in the specific, if you do it right. But I thought a lot about it over time. I mean, I drew maps, and, I envisioned that there were other towns, that were, and there are spaces between that have kind of fallen away, but like, I think that some of those spaces I think it's just a matter of like what's depicted in the fiction, and I think I mapped out so much more than is actually in the book, but then also like it's not continuing on, and some of that are like very rough maps, it's just like a sketch of a space.
I would love to see those maps. Wow, where do they live?
There are actually some up on the Full Stop interview
with Hannah
Yeah,
Lamb Vines?
Yeah, Hannah.
Noted journalist in the front row?
Yeah.
Wow.
Go to Full Stop to see some.
That is really exciting. Wow. Sam.
Yeah, I was wondering, since you have such a rich world that you share with us in this book and so many great characters, how did you navigate that balance of telling us everything that we need to know to get in this world, but also keeping it focused on the characters and their growth and that?
That is such a good question, and like I feel like the art of writing is how do you balance that? I found that I had to cut a lot out. And I think in order to be specific, and it might also be just the way that I work in imagining spaces. Like I had to have a fairly specific idea of what's happening in order, and the backgrounds of the characters in order to be able to write them. But so much of that is unnecessary, and like a lot of that, and the way that I write, I draft a lot, so I think a lot when I'm writing in drafts and in note taking, and so a lot of that comes out in note taking, and then it's really finding what's specific to the story that's being told, and focusing on that. And sometimes that's obvious, but like I'm like a master of like creating an excess of pages and then reducing them, and that's kind of my process. Like it's just writing a lot and being like, okay, what's here that is really relevant, and like thinking about, I think thinking about the reader's experience, because you have to know so much more as a writer about what's being told, especially in a speculative book. I don't know, like this, I never really anticipated writing a speculative book, but it happened to be like the setting for this book that I was just like, why did I do this? Like a whole world, like what? Yeah, but it's fun. And also, like, it's also agonizing.
When you started writing the novel, did you start with a scene or a character or a concept or something else?
I started with Hannah, and I started with the ideas. Like, I started with, like, the germ of the ideas that, like, motivated the book, and, like, I had been thinking a lot about, heady concepts that don't necessarily translate well into fiction, of just, like, what is, like, experience? What is, reading, like, William James and Henri Bergson and thinking about augmentation.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's kind of the root of Hannah's questioning, which stays in there, but it's just, like, how, like, this is... Yeah, like, these are concepts that are, I think I knew the source of inquiry, and I knew, like, the town, and I knew the characters, but, like, and bizarrely, I kind of knew an end point, but I had to really, like, for me, it was very much a process of excavation and like what's the rest of the story?
You balance so masterfully Hannah's heady origins with this idea that she is exploring like where the human begins and ends, but also with these scenes that are so true to teenagehood and so compulsively readable. Her, obsession with recording extinct animals feels so like teenage and angsty, but also pointing towards these like larger questions of, where does the human race begin and end if all of these other species are walking out the door kind of quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like a teenager is like the best person, like the best, like that's an age where you are trying to like situate yourself like within the context of the world and what's happening. And so, like I think we're all like given where we are situationally, and maybe this is how it's always been, but it's like just trying to figure out where we are in the world and like what our future is. It's like it seems like so poignant for to be a young person thinking about that, because it really like the stakes seem really high, and
this Earth, it's all we've got. It's true.
Unless you want to go to Mars with Elon or
well, it isn't gonna work.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Doesn't look that fun.
No.
No. Maybe one or two more questions for Ian. Keelan.
If anybody else wants to go, I don't want to take a turn from somebody, but I'm sort of wondering if I said that already again. How, as a pharmacist, you wrote a lot of the scenes with Hannah and other characters sort of experiencing taking enhancements, like the different effects and where those came from, and if they were based on like what you know as a scientist, and what was sort of how did that sort of shoot off into the different ways that was shown?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I think I don't know if it necessarily comes even from my knowledge as a pharmacist, but more as like I think that like as a teenager, I was around a lot of drugs, and around I think and around like people dealing drugs, and it was just like, oh, I'm really curious about this. I think also like and the other aspect of that for me, like in terms of like the experiential, is that my grandmother is schizophrenic, and I like as a teenager too was just thinking about like, I think the awareness like being around like experimenting and like this awareness of like what is that line between like sanity and insanity, and like what is a drug that like makes someone sane, or like all of these questions kind of played into it, and I think that that's kind of what fueled my interest in pharmacy, like all of those things is why I ended up studying it, not because I like aspired to be a pharmacist, but because of like that curiosity. And I think it was like out of this space of so I think that brings a lot to kind of my experience too of like I would say from like my experience as a pharmacist, maybe I think more about like my experience within the healthcare industry and just like working in hospitals and thinking about like what what people go through and like what is promoted and like what is paid for or what's not, or like how people like give up their life savings and so, or I say that just people give up their life savings in the sense of healthcare is the largest source of bankruptcy in this country. And so I think maybe like my experience like as a pharmacist is more of like the sociological part of it, or like the capitalist part of it, and like the teenage part is probably more like from my experience of being a teenager.
I have a flippant question. Do you have a favorite or most hated pharmaceutical commercial?
I feel really distant from them at this point, but I have to say, like as an answer, Pinterest has like in terms of like love, like Pinterest has some really bizarre old pharmaceutical ads like in their archive. Like just look for them, and it's just the history of like all of these like
Pinterest, like the app, like
the app. Yeah, okay,
just
yeah.
checking.
So Pinterest, the app. If you go on Pinterest, the app, or this is, I mean, I'm sure they're out there otherwise, but like there are just like all of these ads for like Milltown, haloperidol, like also like
Oh my gosh, what are those drugs?
they're all, most of them are like relaxing drugs, and like most of them are just like drugs.
50s housewives,
50s
like have a
housewives.
cocktail, take some Milltown, and
there's like
chill out.
one
Okay.
like Quaaludes, we all know
80s,
Quaaludes.
okay.
Yeah, like there was this one that I was looking at recently. I go down this rabbit hole because I'm just like, what the fuck is this? There was like a woman who was unmarried, and they were like, oh, like
In the ad, she's identified as unmarried.
she's identified as being in her 30s and unmarried, and that she can't get over her daddy issues, so give her some Valium. And that will like cure her neuroses. Yeah. So I'm fascinated by that. I don't know. Do you have a favorite? Do you have
I'm sorry everyone, but I like when I watch TV, I laugh a lot about the ones that are for IBS that are all people swinging through the air.
That's true.
I just have a lot of questions
true.
about why that's how we're depicting people who are free from IBS now. but I'm going to go look on Pinterest. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't own a like television that receives cable, but my like longtime lovers' parents do. When we go visit them, they often are the type of people that have like the TV on, and there are the commercials playing with the IBS swing ads. It's like a whole other thing. Yeah, the pharmaceutical TV commercials.
There's also like a his and hers commercial, I feel, and
Yeah.
like the hers are like antidepressants, and I forget what the his are, which like as a like, did I tune into like the hers and not the his? But it's just like, why are these gendered?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about pharmaceutical ads. That's a whole,
The like ask your doctor formulation is so bizarre to me. It's like your doctor doesn't prescribe to you. You say what you want. Crazy.
Yeah.
And fascinating that that is illegal in other countries. I think.
To ask for what you want.
I think pharmaceutical ads are
pharmaceutical,
illegal.
yeah.
It's like other countries. I think many other countries have agreed that it's like not something
Not
that
great.
not great for people to be marketed pharmaceuticals.
So to be like, hey, this is what I want. They were the direct-to-consumer advertising, and the way that it is was not actually legalized till the 90s.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the U.S.
We were just like coming of age as as the ads were coming out. As consciousness hit us,
and now
the TV ads just came screaming in. And it is such a joy to be here with you on the eve of the publication, the newish birth still infancy of the Enchancers. Thank you so much for coming all the way to San Francisco, and for sharing this beautiful book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rita. And thank you, Car and Green Apple. This has been great.
Thank you. Can we have one more hand for Angie? Thank you both so much. I will echo Rita's sentiment. Thank you for coming to the West Coast to celebrate with us. Thank you all for your attention and engaging questions, and for the madcap one that we needed to end the evening as well. We have copies of both Anne and Rita's books available at the front. You can find them there. Is it safe to assume you would be willing to sign copies of your respective books?
With joy.
Excellent. You heard it here first. They will sign them. So we have them there. You can come back, have them sign them here, and make yourselves comfortable. Take a look around. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, Car and Green Owl, thank you so much for having us. The Rebecca Mackay Rachel Kong event is going to be incredible. If you're around, it'll be amazing.